I will share some slides, and then hopefully we'll be able to also dive into the tool and do a quick demo. So, can everyone see in presentation screen? Okay, great. So let's get right into it. So Trinetics on a big picture is a global health research platform. There's a lot of data in there. So 120 different healthcare organizations are represented. 19 countries are represented. So it's a global data set. And there are a variety of subgeographies also represented. So if you wanted to just study a topic in only North America or South America, you have those options, and those collaborative networks have been built by Trinetics. There's a variety of lab results in every record that gets sent to Trinetics. And this number, some of these numbers are probably slightly out of date, but 70 billion plus date and patient index clinical observations. Trinetics also calls these facts, you'll hear, but so it's a really big, broad platform of health data that's collected and standardized to use for things like clinical trials, but also for secondary health research. Okay, so what does Trinetics do? So I included a picture here, which is when we get into the tool, you'll see is your on the left side of your screen and represents kind of your control panel. So one of the key things it does is it allows you to build these queries where you can build a population or group you're looking to study. And then from that, you can also build subcohorts, or you can build separate distinct cohorts you want to compare to one another. There's a lot of decision making you get at your fingertips to really design things the way you want to for your study. There's also a lot of details you can add, so you can make these very specific queries. So you can examine a variety of outcomes. You can look at trends, so how things are happening across time. There's a variety of advanced analytic features you can use. And depending on your site, you can also request a data file that actually comes out of the platform that you could use to analyze with whatever statistical packages you want and so think of that more as the tools in the platform are great, but you have a really specific type of model you want to apply. So you need to pull it out into R or Python or SAS or whatever you want to use to look at that data set, and that is an option. Okay, so when you log into Trinetics, it's a web-based tool, and this is what your screen will look like for any study you design. So like I mentioned, number one over here is that control panel that navigates you to all the different parts and features of Trinetics and what you can do with your data. Number two over here is anytime you change your data set or adjust your cohort, Trinetics actually saves a snapshot of it. So it really gives you the freedom to explore without worrying about losing track of where you are. So if you want to experiment with a condition and say, well, what if we use this criteria? What does it look like? It'll save a snapshot every time you hit this Count Patients button. And then number three is the real meat of the query building tool, which is where you can design your query. So there's lots of features in here, and when I show you the live demo of Trinetics, we'll dive into them a little bit more. But you have your inclusion criteria, which is this must-have section. You have cannot have, which is an exclusion criteria area. You can do a variety of nesting to really kind of specify and get into the nitty-gritty of how you want various conditions defined. You can also build subgroups. So you can say, I'm going to look at everybody with this condition, but I'm going to build a subgroup of people who choose these treatment options and a separate subgroup of people that choose these treatment options. You can choose which countries you want represented. Trinetics is a research network. You can also just stick to your local network. For us, that's UVM Health Network, or you can pick a variety of global health networks to look at. Okay, so the other beauty of Trinetics is it's a self-directed tool in terms of training and resources. So one of the key things to look for in that upper right corner of Trinetics is the little yellow circle with a question mark in it. That's going to take you to their resource center or help center, and they have a variety of things. So they have a training program which has a lot of different training videos. Some of them are specific to certain geographies, some of them are specific to certain disease types you're studying. They give a basic tutorial and all the way up to much more advanced tutorials of how to use advanced analytic features. The FAQs are open to the community, so anyone can post a question there. And typically someone will answer it and point you to the correct resources. Resources are where they organize some of the answers to the FAQs and some other information that they also have. And then community is where they have tried to gather and organize different resources that serve different communities. So there's a big oncology community, so they try to package everything together for that community. There's also it's still in kind of a beta stage, but a student section. So for students who are doing a variety of research projects, what are some helpful resources for that group? So this is a very rich resource that's at your fingertips as a Trinetics user, and it's really helpful for if you get stuck or you're still trying to figure out how to work the tool at all. So I like to point that out because there's a lot of information there that is very helpful. Okay, so let's get into what Trinetics can do. So in addition to building whatever research cohort or group you want to study, there are also a lot of built-in tools so that you can analyze your data. You could do almost, you can make figures. There's a lot within the platform so that you don't have to jump from here to do all the parts of your research study. So one of the big features is the analytics. I just updated this picture. Some of these slides had gone out of date, but the latest feature that's been added is cost proportional hazards models. And you can do this. So like I mentioned, you can build cohorts and you can build separate, distinct cohorts. And you can see in the analytics feature, they tell you if it's some analytic feature that you use on a single cohort or two cohorts. So you can pick all of these different types of analytic tools to use. You can do, again, some of these are comparing two things at the same point in time. There is some temporality type treatment pathways that you can look at things over time. And we'll dive into the tools so you can look at some of these as well. What else does Trinetics do? So like I mentioned, depending on your site, you can request de-identified data sets for your population. You can do this in two ways. If your site allows it, you can request it from your local Trinetics administrator. If you end up wanting to request a data set from the research network, which is the global research network Trinetics has created, you can actually license a data set for 12 months to do different types of work or studies and publication. And there's some rules around that, but it's possible. Trinetics is also really helpful with clinical trials. Clinical trials can participate in larger studies via the Trial Connect request option. I probably won't talk about that feature as much today, but that is a feature built into Trinetics. One of the other really nice things I like about Trinetics as a former analyst is it is intuitively designed to help you stay really organized. So there are lots of places for you to upload documentation and protocol information, especially if you're collaborating with other analysts. You can share helpful information about how you're defining things and just notes so that there's lots of places to upload documentation, which is really nice. And then lastly, Trinetics has a pretty good customer support model. So if you are doing a study and you need design assistance or you're just stumped on how to do something in Trinetics, they do have people who can help answer those questions um, and keep you moving. So we have a sense a little bit of what Trinetics can do. What are some of the limitations still that exist in using Trinetics? One thing I will say is Trinetics is the data is real time and it is real world data. So nothing is static. So that's always an important thing to keep in mind. Certain sensitive data elements aren't going to make it in. When you license a data set or request a data set, it's usually always going to be a de-identified data set. So that's also just something to keep in mind. They have pretty good documentation about where they do any obfuscations. So they do some date shifting. And what that means is, the time between the dates will stay the same, but if you get any dates, those will be shifted so that you can't back into any sensitive information. The second point is written specifically to our health network, but is something important to consider. When uh, when we implement Trinetics, there are various levels of um, data sharing that we sign up for. We're currently signed up for a level that doesn't send any billing diagnosis information. There are a number of sites that this is probably true for still. We're hoping to get to a point where we start sending billing diagnosis information. What that means is certain conditions where diagnosis codes or procedure codes aren't really added to an encounter until the end. They aren't always well represented in the data. So there are certain things that are much harder to study in Trinetics. I think one of the biggest ones we've found recently was without the billing and diagnosis information, sometimes looking at pregnancy is really hard because that's, a lot of the information about the pregnancy and the encounter are added at the end and tied to the final billing claim. One of the bummers is that you don't always get to see how many sites when you're looking at global networks or the larger research network is you don't always get to see how many healthcare organizations have billing diagnosis and that richer data set. So those are just things to keep in mind as you're using this type of data. Kim, this is one of Kim's slides that I have incorporated. This is just a little bit information about the Trial Connect features. One of the features of Trinetics is helping people get connected to different studies. But I want to jump into a demo. So if there are questions about Trial Connect, we can maybe circle back on that. But let me just switch my screens and actually show you Trinetics itself. Okay, so hopefully everyone sees the right screen. So what we're looking at here is a pretty basic query builder. Can everyone see that? Okay. Okay, so like I mentioned, everything here on the left helps you navigate to these different portions of how to query your data, how to look at your data, how to summarize your data, and then also like how to analyze your data. And then down here at the bottom is where you can ask for help. Study management, down here we'll look at in a second, is where a lot of that documentation and that collaboration of documentation can occur. So one of the nice things is you have control to just name all of your queries. So this is a demo on diabetes, so we can keep track of it. You have information about when you last ran your query, which is this little blue button over here is your little run the query command. I have selected the research network for this demo, but you can see all of these other networks are available to you. And a little bit of live information about how many of those HCOs or healthcare organizations are online and sending data and who might be off, and some information about the number of patients represented in each. Also, they have some nice features over here about, can you do clinical trials connect features? Can you do analytics? If you did a cool project and you want to license a data set or download a data set, is that an option? And you can see it's really only an option for research and for my local network. But it's a good reminder before you get too far down the trail of a cool project in Latin America and then realize you can't download the data set. So the search criteria you can use, you can just start typing. If you know you're interested in certain types of visits, you can select those. There's genomics labs are all mostly organized by LOINC codes. There's medications procedures. There's this value added piece for cancer related to various cancer markers. You could pick things by demographics. And the exclusion criteria, search criteria is set up the same way. You can also see information about how many patients. So I already ran this query just in the interest of time, and I'm only looking at type 2 diabetes, found 3.3 million patients, but out of 110 million, 97 HCOs have fed data in to create this result out of 104 HCOs that are participating. There's also this filters section. So I could filter by a variety of things. So you could look at medical center type. Maybe I'm only interested in academic health centers and I'm not interested in non-academic. You want to make sure, maybe you want to make sure you pick a healthcare organization that has data that is representative of what you want to look at. So this is a somewhat new feature. But say you're looking at genomics, not all sites are sending genomic data, so that way you could narrow and be more specific about your query. And then you can also apply population filters here. I have this set to be anyone under 65. You could also apply certain filters to individual criteria you've selected. I will also say Trinetics uses some NLP to infer information. So, right, based on this, it looks like we have 7,000 data points that suggest diabetes mellitus, but they're inferred from an NLP model that Trinetics has. You may or may not want to include those. So we have this really simple query we've run to look for type 2 diabetes. I will say with this research network, the healthcare organizations piece, you're going to get this. This is a feature that's really for your local network. I'll tell you more about the HCOs represented in your local network. So we can do some quick exploring of our cohort. So we can look at demographics. We can look at breakdowns of age, race, and ethnicity, and sex. And you can see this little run query up in the right-hand corner. Anytime you want to change something or you want to refresh, you can just click that button. Also, as you go down these pieces, as I was prepping for this demo today, I was like, oh, I don't remember what this one does. Trinetics is really intuitive and builds a lot of those resources we talked about into their features. So I clicked here to try and remind myself what the analytic criteria section does, and it effectively builds you a nice concert diagram of you've built these cohorts and subcohorts, how many people do you have and where are you losing people? And it gives you this lovely article breaking down with screenshots what it's doing. This little piece here is a snapshot of what you'll end up with. You can also look at rate of arrival. So if you want to see how consistently should you expect to see a certain type of patient that you are looking for in your study, or how much time do you think you need, what are the time constraints you need to apply to your study to make sure you hit an appropriate population size? This feature is nice for you to see, how many estimated people arrive over time and kind of look at it backwards and see a little bit of forecasting about where it's headed. Um, the summary statistics feature is really more information about your data. It's not super specific, but you can see they can tell you on average per patient, you'll get almost 2,500 facts. Remember that a fact can be a lab, a genomic test, a diagnosis, a procedure. It's pretty much any data point about an individual patient. Um, and then once you're kind of happy with your cohort and you've looked at your data, you can do a new analysis. Trinetics is always keeping us updated of the features that are coming, but you don't get yet. So they have these lovely little locks to tease you. But these are the other features that we have. Um, so we can analyze a variety of outcomes. We can compare our cohorts based on certain features. We can compare outcomes, incidence, prevalence. Those are all the features. We could build. I haven't built a very exciting cohort to analyze, but if we have time, we could dive into one of those more. And then the other piece I do want to show is the documentation piece. When you set up a study, this is the first thing you'll fill out. And we can edit it now, but you can change the study name. You can include information about the research process. I have this labeled as secondary research. You include information about the study, any sponsor information, target information, and then you can also upload documents if we navigate here. So this is a place where you could upload any data dictionaries or definition terms that you want to make sure are in a shared place for you and any other analysts working on the project. Or you could also just upload notes here about whatever you're working on or any decisions you've made that's related to your study. You can also control who's on your study team, obviously, too. And then the bottom part here of your navigation pane is that design assistance. So let's say we get to a certain point where, we've gotten started, but we're really stuck in how to group our cohorts to do the type of analysis we want. We can submit a question here to a Trinetics specialist who can help us figure that out. So I think the last thing I want to show in this very quick demo is that resource page. So the training program, this is where all the videos are of all the various trainings. They do occasionally offer these trainings to all users live. And I found they're pretty consistent to what's in the library and what's offered live. But you can see they have some specialties by area, by region, and then just the basics of how do I even build a query of something I want to look at. They're all pretty good and straightforward to follow. And the other piece I'll show is this community page where they have kind of put together some useful networking tools for different groups. So I mentioned oncology and students. And I think this is an area they are looking to expand. So if you're interested, they're always open to feedback if you think there's a key group missing.
Hey, Caitlin, I
So
might just, unless you're just about to wrap up, but there's one question in the chat, and then I wanted to ask, is this, how does someone get access to this? Maybe you said it and I missed it, but is it free? I'm not thinking it's free, or is there a organizational license or what?
yeah. So I was wrapping up. So great time for questions. So at UVM, I'm not heavily involved in all of the cost parts, but it is free, I believe, because you're giving them data. So that's kind of your cost to entry for Trinetics. But then to our users, it's also there isn't any cost associated with it as long as you're a member for at least at UVM, the Larner College of Medicine, or UVM Health Network. I know that this has recently launched in Maine, but I'm less familiar with their rules of who is given access and not. Um, they also have recently been established, so you may be hearing about it maybe more soon.
Awesome. And then in the chat, were you ready for questions? Because we just have
Yeah,
a
go for
few
it.
minutes, right? Yeah, there's a chat. I don't know, Joseph, if you want to share this, but question about IRBs and how is there a central IRB or how are IRBs handled in accessing this data?
That is a great question. Um, I think so. A lot of times you're ending up with uh, de-identified data. And so some of that will depend on your local IRB. Um, but typically, Trinetics is pushing everything to local IRBs in order to license data sets from what I have seen. We've only had one person actually license a research data set. Um, and Trinetics deferred to us to make sure it was IRB compliant. So it is related to your local IRB's rules.
Right. And if you're doing a multi-center project, then potentially there could be a reliance agreement, but you would definitely go to your IRB for local, either expedited or exempt determination, depending on what the research is that you're doing.
Okay, great. And then are queries needing a complex study or can simple questions be answered, such as vaccine reactions?
Um, Both. So you could have a really complex group, or you could do something much more simple, like looking at adverse events related to vaccines. You can do both.
Awesome. Joseph, hopefully you got your questions answered. Any other questions? And I know our case study is from Maine, so maybe they'll shed some light on what the Maine situation is in using Trinetics. All right, well, we'll have a chance at the end for more questions if they come up. I'm going to turn it over to, and thank you so much, Caitlin. That was very, very interesting and a great overview. I've heard so much about Trinetics, but I haven't seen the inside of it yet. So Yvette is going to introduce our case presenters today.
Yes, thank you, Caitlin. That was great. The demo was really illuminating for me. So thank you also to Dr. Carolyn Schulebeck. She's a postdoctoral fellow in Cliff Rosen's lab here at Maine Health. She received her PhD in biomedical engineering from Cornell University and is currently researching the skeleton and with a focus on the negative effects of weight loss on bone. She is funded by a grant from the Translational Institute for Space Research, which is an extension of NASA. That sounds really exciting and interesting. She's joined by Ben Aronson, who is a third-year medical student at the University of New England, and he is very interested in the field of orthopedic surgery and sports medicine. So he is joining Dr. Schlebeck to study this negative effects of weight loss on the skeleton. So thank you so much for agreeing to be our case.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. We're excited to hear everyone's feedback.